Well, thank you very much for the invitation to come by today. First of all, I have to brag on Jason Chaffetz. He's the role model you want to be like if you ever attain the chairmanship of the House Oversight Committee. In fact, right before I got elected chairman of the Oversight Committee, I looked like Jason Chaffetz. I had his dark hair, I had his nice smile and all that, but they've hardened me, Jason. This mainstream media, they've hardened me, and it's been very difficult to step in as chairman of the House Oversight Committee during the Biden administration, when you have, as what Senator Grassley was talking about as I came in towards the end, I would argue, weaponized media in addition to a weaponized federal government. Every investigation that we have led in the House Oversight Committee, we have been met with robust opposition from the mainstream media. I think the most dishonest person in Washington wasn't George Santos. The most dishonest person in Washington was Philip Bump, the fact checker for the Washington Post. So we've had to deal with that, but we move forward, and we appreciate Heritage and the great work, the partnership that we have with Heritage, and all of the good things that we do together. I just wanted to mention a couple of things about the Biden investigation, because that's something that I think most people have been keeping up with our House Oversight Committee. We've led a lot of different investigations. We have a lot of investigations ongoing. I think we're doing good work and trying to shine some light on the atrocities of this administration, the waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement of the Biden administration. But we, for example, we're having the FDA commissioner in Thursday for a hearing. We have no shortage of questions to ask the FDA commissioner, much like every other commissioner, cabinet secretary in the Biden administration. We're trying to bring them in. We request information. We're at the very least want to make sure they know we're watching them, even though the mainstream media is not. But with respect to the Biden investigation, what we found is that if you go back to the beginning of the investigation in February, I would say I got subpoena power in January of last year, but we had a little hiccup in the first few weeks electing a speaker, and that put everything behind with respect to populating the committees and approving budgets for the committees and all of that stuff normally done in the lame duck session previously. But we went in February with subpoena power. We had been working with the banks to be able to obtain bank records. As someone that has a banking background, someone in business, I knew that the conventional wisdom was you go after their taxes. You go after their taxes to see what they have. But as someone that's involved in banking, seen a lot of tax returns, a lot of business plans, a lot of cash flow statements. If you want to know the true financial picture of someone, you look at their bank statements, because bank records don't lie. And people can manipulate their taxes. There are legal ways and illegal ways to manipulate the taxes. We wanted to focus the investigation around bank records from what we had heard and what we had learned from previous reporting from the Johnson and Grassley reports and different things like that, from Miranda Devine and other investigative reporters. We knew the Biden family had taken in large sums of money from foreign governments. But at the beginning of the investigation, the media narrative was that this was all based on the laptop, and the laptop was Russian disinformation. And we needed to, at the very beginning, prove that the laptop was, in fact, legitimate. Because if you go back to January of last year, they were still saying that the entire contents of the laptop had been manipulated in a Russian disinformation campaign. So we started with the bank statements. We subpoenaed numerous different banks. And the banks, I believe, with all my heart, wanted us to have that information. I believe they wanted us to see what they had been concerned about in the 170 suspicious activity reports that these banks filed. And one of the things the media, who are very financially illiterate, by the way, when they talk about a suspicious activity report, they would write like, well, it's just like an overdraft statement or something, overdraft fee. People get these are common to get. They're not common. And a bank will not want to issue a suspicious activity report on a prominent person, because that's an invitation for bank examiners to come into the bank. And the last thing the bank wants, any bank, whether it's a little bank that I was affiliated with or a big bank, is bank examiners waiting for them when they unlock the door the next morning, which is what happens when you file suspicious activity reports against the son of the sitting Vice President of the United States. We found that through this investigation over the past year and 2 months that the Biden family's taken in well over $20 million from adversaries around the world. These are bad people in bad countries. We've now subpoenaed and reviewed all their bank documents. We then brought people in for depositions and transcribed interviews. Obviously, we've had Hunter Biden in for a deposition. We've had Joe Biden in for a deposition, or not Joe Biden, but Jim Biden in for a deposition. We gave them an opportunity to explain to us what they did to receive this money and why they funneled the money through what I would call a shell company. And a shell company, by my definition, is a company with no assets or no known purpose. And the Bidens had about 27 or 28 LLCs. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say a couple of them were legitimate, but the majority of them were not. And they never could explain what they did. You go back to the media narrative when we began the investigation, the Bidens had an energy company. The Bidens had an investment company like Jared Kushner. There's no difference. Hunter Biden and Jared Kushner, same thing. They had an investment company. Well, what we found in the investigation, and we even released an email from a bank examiner looking at one of Hunter Biden's bank accounts, they said this investment company appears to not have any investments in it. I call that a shell company. And the Bidens had an opportunity to explain what they did for the money, and they couldn't explain it. Jim Biden's best explanation, that's Joe Biden's brother, when asked, what did you do to receive all this money from China? He said, we were looking for investments for China. Well, did you find any investments? No, we didn't find any. But they got paid $9 million from I would argue, the Chinese government. It depends on who you want to say the real owner of CEFC was. So we found that they were influence peddling, which is what it is. The goal of the whole investigation was to give the American people the truth about what this family was doing. They were selling access to Joe Biden to our enemies around the world. Then the objective of the investigation was to then pass legislation to define what influence peddling is and prevent that from happening in the future. So we can prevent the Joe Bidens and the Bob Menendezes from influence peddling, from their families' influence peddling. And that's where we are now. We've brought people in for the depositions. We've subpoenaed the bank records. We know about the shell companies. We know about pretty close to the amount of money, the tens of millions of dollars they got from our enemies around the world. We've given everybody an opportunity to be, that we're in the Biden orbit, to explain what they did. 3 of the Biden associates have all testified, that would be Galanis, Archer, and Bobolinsky, that Joe Biden was the central figure in the influence peddling scheme. He was the family closer, the one that went in and closed the deals with the bad people in the bad countries who were sending the money. So we've implicated Joe. We found countless financial crimes. We're giving now Joe Biden an opportunity to come in and explain himself, just like we gave Hunter Biden an opportunity to come in and have the public hearing, which he declined. We've sent Joe Biden questions. We're waiting to hear back from him. We have some more information that we've requested that we expect to get back very soon. And then we're going to enter in what I hope will be a phase of accountability. So that's kind of a summary of that investigation. Jason, I'll be happy to answer any questions or anything. Okay.
All right, so one of the challenges with oversight is trying to get all the members on the one page, trying to get them all moving in the same direction and doing all the research. I mean, that is truly one of the more difficult things to do this. The focus of the investigation has been about the broader network, right? It's been about the broader, what was the Biden family doing? And the other side of the equation is you have to balance out what the minority wants to do, because the Jamie Raskins of the world, they want to go off and talk about Donald Trump. From your perspective, when they make those arguments about Trump, why the justification? Why? What is the difference between what happened in there with the Trump investigation versus what's going on here with the Biden investigation? Why do you think you have the justification to continue to pursue it?
Well, what we found in the investigation is that there were numerous government agencies that were investigating the Bidens: the Securities and Exchange Commission, the FBI, the Department of Justice in several different jurisdictions, the IRS. Each time they were told to stand down. So in addition to the financial crimes that we've discovered, we found a massive cover-up in many different government agencies. With respect to Trump, Trump's been investigated. He's still being investigated. I read in the paper he's in court in several different jurisdictions. So there's no shortage of investigating Donald Trump that's taken place by Congress or by the Department of Justice. There is a problem with the Bidens. For some reason, this family has been investigated for over a decade, but yet they've never brought Hunter Biden in for questions. Now he's finally going to court for some minor things: lying on a gun application, not paying taxes on his W-2. What he's in court now for not paying taxes was the W-2 income from Burisma. Now, what I've said about Burisma was the one legitimate thing he did. It was a corrupt energy company, but we knew about it. He was on the board. They paid him through LLCs, which was very weird. Most people, you get paid individually, but these were funneled through LLCs like everything else. And he got a W-2 for it. He never paid taxes on that. What the whistleblowers Shapley and Ziegler said was all this money, this $28 million, however you want to classify it, that the Bidens took in through influence peddling, that they never paid taxes on any of it. So the Bidens could owe millions more in federal income tax. So this is I think the biggest public corruption story of my lifetime. And it's been frustrating that the more we find out, the more they attack me or Jim Jordan for finding stuff.
You won't get a lot of tears from me. I've been there. I understand that. So it's not right, but yes, I totally get it. Let's talk for a moment about whistleblowers, because they're one of the most vital components, right? There's 2.2 million federal employees, and you got a House Oversight Committee that, I don't know what the numbers are, it could be like 50 or so people that work there. And so you really do rely on the whistleblowers that step up and provide that information. In this case, that hearing I think that you held with the IRS whistleblowers and saying that they couldn't do their job, since that hearing, which we all got to see out in public, and these are not Republican partisan folks, right? They're IRS whistleblowers who want to do their job. What's been the consequence of what they've done? What have they gone through, and where is that going?
Well, they've been retaliated against, and that's the worst thing you can do. If you're on the Oversight Committee, you depend on two things, in my opinion, for information. You depend on the IGs, the inspectors general. We have some good ones, some average ones, and some pitiful ones. But you also depend on whistleblowers. And you want to create an environment where the whistleblowers, at the very least, are not retaliated against. But what we've seen with Shapley and Ziegler is they've been retaliated against in a bad way. And, we've tried to shine a light on this. I know judiciary is trying to shine a light on this. We want to try to hold people accountable, but it's very difficult to hold anyone in the Department of Justice accountable with this Merrick Garland run.
So let's talk about this. I mean, the whole symposium is the weaponization of government. You're looking not just the Biden administration, but the Biden investigation itself, but the bigger, broader investigation of the weaponization of government. What do you want people at home to understand? What should the public understand about how critical this is and what's really going on there? Because you're gonna have some corrupt people along the way, but there's a whole nother level of. Tell us what you're seeing there.
We're really seeing a two-tier system of justice in America. I know that seems to be a conservative talking point, but it's fact. And you look at how Trump, his family, and his administration was treated versus the Biden administration. Just last week, a judge scolded Abby Lowell, Hunter Biden's lawyer, for saying, how can you expect how do you expect us to hold people accountable when you all defy Republican subpoenas and Republican requests for information, but yet this Department of Justice prosecutes Republicans who defied congressional subpoenas? I mean, the hypocrisy is unbelievable. How different conservatives are treated. You go back to even the IRS, and it's not just the Department of Justice that's been weaponized. I could go down at every agency nearly in the federal government has been weaponized. And the reason it's been weaponized, in my opinion, is these agencies have been populated with left-wing activists. You don't find many conservatives who say when they graduate from college, I want to go work for the federal government. But you do find liberals that do that. And I have met very few conservatives who are career government employees. And when you have a new administration, let's say Trump wins the presidency, comes in with new cabinet secretaries and undersecretaries, you're still going to have those career left-wing activists in the agencies. I was friends with Scott Pruitt. He went to EPA. He tried to turn EPA in a different direction, right? But the career employees said, no, we don't like coal. We don't like any of this energy policy. We're not going to abide by that. That's where they started the whole Schedule F classification, where you could have federal employees that had to comply with the new administration's policies and objectives. Because right now, even if you get a conservative administration and you put conservative cabinet secretaries and undersecretaries in there, you've got these career, I call them deep state employees. I think you coined that term, or maybe you were Devin Nunes. And they're activist bureaucrats who abuse their power, in my opinion, go after conservatives and conservative causes, and do everything in their ability to protect liberals. I don't think they like Joe Biden. I don't think they respect Joe Biden, but they hate Donald Trump. And they don't want a disruption of their deep state bureaucracy that's completely populated by left-wing activists.
Yeah, there's kind of a legendary story, and I'll just share it with you briefly. A member of Congress goes to meet with the cabinet secretary, but when he gets there, the cabinet secretary is not there. And finally, the member of Congress gets all whipped up and says, well, I'm leaving. And there's a bunch of senior staff sitting in there with this, that worked for the cabinet secretary. And the kind of the senior person of the senior staff said, oh, no, sir, please stay here. We'd be happy to answer all your questions. And Congressman gets more whipped up and says, I'm not meeting with the B team. I had a meeting with the secretary, and I'm not meeting with the B team. And that senior staff member says, well, you're actually meeting with the right people. You're right. We're the B team. We be here before you, we be here now, and we be here after you. We also be the ones that make the decisions around here. So if you want to get something done, you need to be talking to us. And that's the sad reality of of what's going on. So many of these people, I think Secretary Mayorkas is in this category. They're just professionals at testifying. I think when I was chair, and I know Chairman Comer's done this as well, the people you really want to talk with aren't the cabinet secretaries, right? Those are the big brand names, right? Okay, we'll get a big audience. A lot of people on television will pay attention. Let's get the secretary in there. No. You want to go about 2-3 levels deep to the people who actually are doing this and out there. And I'm telling you, that's where the most revealing information is. It's that second, third level tier of people who will actually tell you what's going on. And you know what? I don't want to demonize all the people in federal government. I think there are some good, decent people that really do want to do the right thing. But I think also, and maybe if you can comment on this, jurisdiction for the federal workforce also falls to the Oversight Committee. And by the way, I did want to make note, when I was chairman, it was Oversight and Government Reform. When Elijah Cummings became the chairman, he got rid of the word government because, of course, government can't do any wrong. It's just oversight and reform because he wanted to reform the private sector. He didn't want to reform government. Anyway, but the federal workforce and what Biden is doing behind the scenes to lay the foundation so that if a new administration, a Trump administration, put the handcuffs on him, that he can't fire or dismiss the people that are actually running the show, the B team, if you will.
Yeah, you've seen articles just in the last couple of weeks. They're trying to Trump-proof. Yeah. That's what the mainstream media calls it. They're proud of that. Yeah. They're trying to Trump-proof the federal government to where they do things like what we would call in Kentucky burrowing employees in to make sure you can't fire them, giving them everything, putting them in a position where they're civil servants where they cannot be terminated once the administration changes hands. And that's very unfortunate because obviously we need a new attorney general, a new director of the EPA. We need a new Homeland Security secretary, but that's not going to be enough. We've got to change the attitude of the left-wing activists who have taken over most of the important government agencies. And there are good federal workers, and I would argue the majority are excellent federal workers that are there for the right reasons and trying to do a good job. But the ones that have risen to the top in many of these agencies are less than desirable people if you're a taxpayer or someone in the private sector.
Me personally, if you believe in term limits, there also have to be term limits on the federal bureaucracy, the federal employees. That's where they need that. That's where they have.
And I believe in term limits. I'm all for term limits. I think there are two things. This is off the subject of oversight, but it's really not. There's two things that need to happen in Congress. If they don't happen, it's not going to get any better. It's going to continue to be worse. You have to have term limits, and that would be with a exclamation point about the Senate, because the senators stay there a lot longer than the House members. But in both chambers, you need term limits, and you have to pass a balanced budget amendment, because there's no way. I've been in Congress almost 8 years. There's no way Congress is going to balance the budget unless they have to, unless it is the law of the land that they have to. Because my biggest disappointment in this Congress, the 118th Congress, is not making cuts, not proposing, not passing, and not just regular order, but not trying to identify agencies. I wanted to set an example out of the National Archives. I wanted to set an example out of the Department of Justice for their obstruction of our investigation. We could not get those cuts.
I am totally with you there, 100%. For me personally, I also do believe that you have to starve the beast. We talked about that earlier. If you don't starve the beast, you don't actually solve the problem. And for me personally, we need to go back to, and this should really be studied out, we need to go back to the way it used to be. I don't think there should even be an appropriations committee. The authorizing committee should be the same group and organization that does the funding. Why do you have a separate? Here's what happens. Jim Jordan chairing the Judiciary Committee, holding hearings for 2 years, you ain't bringing them all up there. Meanwhile, they just go over to the Appropriations Committee and get their FBI building and everything else fully funded. You're going to have a lot more responsiveness to a Jim Jordan or James Comer if they have to actually go to that same committee where they're withholding documents and personnel and won't allow testifying and all that. Why do we have an appropriations committee? Because they're obviously not doing their job, right?
That's exactly right.
So, well, thanks for letting me give that little speech there.
I believe it. That's they really tied our hands on accountability when they would not go along with cuts that we tried to get passed to the House of Representatives.
We got to let you go. Final thoughts on where the Biden investigation is going. You kind of wrapped it up, but give us another summary here and what we should be looking for.
Well, right now we're going to try to figure out the best ways to hold this family accountable. We've proven they were influence peddling. We've proven many financial crimes they've committed. We've proven that Joe Biden, this was never an investigation of Hunter Biden like the media was. This was always an investigation of Joe Biden. And what we've proven, 3 Biden associates all testified under oath that Joe Biden was the central figure in the influence peddling scheme. Now, I don't think the American people approve of that. I don't think they approve of our president or vice president being for sale. So we're going to try to figure out the best path forward to hold people accountable. And then we're going to focus from my committee on passing legislation to prevent the Menendezes and the Bidens from doing this again, because the law is pretty murky with what you can do. If you look at what Menendez is trying to argue in his defense, well, it was my wife. It was my wife. You know, I mean, your family members the same. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and they mention, you know, what constitutes a bribe and immediate family members and things like that. So I think that we've got to focus on. We've given the American people the truth. We've led a transparent administration, a transparent investigation. Now we want to hold people accountable, and we want a legislative fix and try to prevent this from happening in the future.
Chairman James Comer of the Oversight Committee, thank you for joining us. That was great.